Well, I'm really excited we have Jason Bornhorst here. How many of you have heard of the Tech Arb? Most of you, okay. You know this is the student accelerator here at the University of Michigan. Well, the Tech Arb began not too long ago. A 2009 graduate named Jason Bornhorst is here. Is the student most responsible for founding the Tech Arb. I'm excited about Jason because not only did he found the Tech Arb, but while he was a student, he started 2 businesses, was a part of a third, and 2 of those 3 actually were acquired by different companies, and he's now into his 4th in Austin, Texas. I could give you a long list of other things why I think he's a pretty cool guy, but I'll let you see for himself. Let's introduce and welcome Jason Bornhorst.
Hey guys, how you doing? Yeah? Friday? Almost there. So, I'm Jason Bornhorst. Spend about 10 or 15 minutes kind of telling my story, and then David and I will talk a little bit. You know, to kind of kick things off, I was actually sitting in your chair about 5 years ago. So I think it was the very first time they had started this class, and I was in this class as well. I'm a computer science grad, graduated in 2009, and also have this certificate of entrepreneurship. So I think I was the first person to actually get that. Who in this class is working on that certificate? Okay, all you guys. So it was awesome. I definitely recommend that. And you know, looking back on a little bit of my background, I came into college with an entrepreneurial spirit, but I always thought that I would just be putting that on hold. I thought I'd get my Michigan engineering degree, go work for Apple for a couple years, learn some stuff, and then I'd go do this startup thing. And about sophomore year, I realized that there was a whole ton of money and mentorship and people willing to help if you just raise your hand and say, hey, I want to get started. And we knew fucking nothing when we got started. Like, literally, we made so many mistakes, and I'll talk about a lot of those, but like, it's really important to kind of get started. So I write 25K in double credits because that was the genesis of my very first company. We got 25 grand from RPM Ventures here in town, convinced 2 of my buddies to stay the summer. We started a company called Campus Roost, and we were also getting credits for working on it. So pretty unique set of circumstances that I think the university offered. So let's talk about Campus Roost. So you guys are familiar with campus leasing. I put November 14th up there because that is the day that the leasing opens up, and typically everyone will wait outside the houses or landlords they want to work with so they get the best house. And I don't know if that still happens today, but it was a huge problem when I was an undergrad. We started Campus Roost to solve that. So we made an online leasing solution for students. They could come in, see all the properties on campus with a few clicks, sign them and their buddies up. Basically stayed that summer to work on that business, and the model was really unique. We actually worked with international student groups to help place international students coming into Ann Arbor. So I remember this, in the first month or 2 of the summer, we were half our time coding, half the time I was putting a suit on, running around Ann Arbor, getting all of the landlords to sign up to our platform, and then a third of the time working with the international student groups so that when students were getting those first emails about, hey, welcome to Michigan, welcome to Ann Arbor, we were the link for here's where you should find housing. We actually placed 20 leases that summer, so in the first 60 days of starting the business. And in a moment of immaturity, realized that that wasn't exciting enough, and we pivoted into a social network. I shit you not. Yep. This is like right when Facebook had just, like, it had been in Michigan's campus for like a year or 2. No one really quite understood it yet, and we're like, man, we can do this too, but for campus real estate. So the Campus Roost that you will see online publicly now is a social network for campus neighborhoods. We went out and actually indexed every single house, apartment, fraternity, dorm on campus. And this is in the years before Google Street View had an API. So we actually did it with feet on the street and cameras. Literally gave our best friends cameras with instructions to walk down all the streets in Ann Arbor and take photos of all the properties in a sequential order. And then we wrote software that would just take the data dump from those flash drives and stuff it into our database, which had a really cool effect on the user experience because on the homepage of the site, it was type in your address, and as soon as you started typing in 943 Greenwood, you'd see a picture of your house. We launched that product on the very first day of campus with a ridiculous marketing stunt. We had went out to IKEA and bought 700 white folding chairs and like drove them home in the truck and spent 2 days spray painting all of those chairs with our company logo on the top, Campus Roost, and then the phrase on the seat, your neighbors could be sitting here. And we went out the night before the very first day of campus, and we put one on every 5th porch in the city. And when we went into the school, into the classrooms, and we would replace a single chair with our chair, and then said nothing. We told the press, or told no press, nothing. And then the next day, everybody wakes up, they see these chairs, and there was a huge buzz on campus. Like, where the hell did these chairs come from? Got a call from the Michigan Daily. We were the front page the next day. And within 30 days, actually, a third of campus had signed up for our website. It's really cool. All from 700 folding chairs. And in fact, those chairs are like still around today. I've seen them. Like, and this is why we did chairs, because it's what's the one thing that a college student has not enough of? Is chairs. So that's how Campus Roost got started. Unfortunately, we're known more for our marketing stunt than we are for the actual company. 2 to 3 months in, you know, we had a ton of activity, but ultimately you settle in, you're busy, you have your own friends, people aren't as interested in meeting their neighbors. So the social model didn't really work. So we ultimately shut that company down. But as sophomores, you know, huge learning in terms of like getting something built in the summer and getting your fellow students to use it. So, a million good deeds. So as a junior, the App Store had just come up. Apps were just starting to become a thing. I got together with a friend of mine who was an engineer, another friend of mine who was a designer. I'm like, hey, you know, we should have a crack at this. Like, let's stay this summer, let's just see what we can do. And we had no idea what that company would do. Started brainstorming and came across an idea, which was to take the movie Pay It Forward. Have you guys seen that movie, for the most part? So we loved the viral effect that you saw in that movie. And we're like, how can we translate that into a mobile application? And what we came up with was a concept called Do Good, which was an app to help thousands of people do a single random act of kindness each day. So everyone who opened the app on a given day would get the same exact deed. They'd get ways to share it. They'd get ways to comment on it. And we basically formed communities around random acts of kindness each day. Built that in a summer, launched it as a free app on the App Store. No idea how to market, just put it up there. We're lucky in the fact that we got picked up by Forbes. We were the New York Times App of the Week. A bunch of outlets picked it up because it was just a novel concept. And quickly got several 100,000 downloads. To date, about 1.5 million good deeds have been done on behalf of the application. And that company was acquired by a company called Tonic about 6 months later. So still as juniors, basically. So in about a span of 9 months, founded, built this app, got it on the store, people used it, and we sold the company. So unexpected in that we had no idea that was the plan going into it, but a neat story nonetheless. So keys to a basement. David talked about TechArb. I hope that many of you guys have been there and hope to go there and actually work because it's an awesome place. But TechArb actually started to some extent in my living room. We had formed this like half-broken student group called Maze Ventures, which was about 13 entrepreneurs who were running companies, and we would just meet in my living room with a case of beer and just talk about what we were doing. And coming into the summer of our senior year, everyone was deciding to stay in Ann Arbor, but we had no place to work. Like it was basically go to the ugly, work from your house, etc. I was fortunate to know a couple of the guys in the city, ultimately found some unused real estate in the current TechArb's location, which is this basement with no windows. There's literally nothing down there. I understand it's been built out a lot more now, but we basically got keys to a space and permission to use it for free for 3 months. So the 13 of us went out, pulled $700, bought $700 of IKEA tables, dropped power from the ceiling, went out and called Time Warner, got Wi-Fi hooked up, and worked there for 3 months on our startups. And what we did a really nice job of is not only working down there, but documenting what we were doing. So we put a blog up, we got in touch with all the local press, and TechArb became a thing before it was ever really a thing. Like we just kind of off the cuff named it that, and the name stuck, which is funny. So that's the story of TechArb. And I don't know if the IKEA tables are still there, but I still own those tables. Nobody ever paid me back. Yeah, yeah. So, so 1 million out of a coffee shop. Who here knows the company Mobiata? Anybody? I'll have to tell you about the story. So Mobiata was, basically Mobiata makes top-selling travel apps. We make a big app called Flight Track, tracks any flight worldwide. We make apps to book hotels, apps to manage your trip. If you go into the iTunes travel section and paid, we basically have the first kind of 1, 2, 3, and 4 slots. And in fact, if you go into any Apple store, 2 of the apps on all the demo iPads are Mobiata apps. That's an Ann Arbor company. 75% of that company is Michigan grads, and I was the second person to join that company. What's really unique about Mobiata, it was literally being run out of Sweetwater Cafe in Carytown at $1 million a year run rate, making $1 million a year selling Flight Track, running out of Sweetwater Cafe. Founded by a guy named Ben Kazaz, came to Ann Arbor from Carleton University. Him and I got hooked up through Do Good, just through chatting about mobile. And from that kind of core group, we built out Mobiata to what it is today, which was ultimately 12 people, mostly U of M grads, and the company was acquired by Expedia in 2010. And our headquarters is actually still in Nichols Arcade. If you walk by Nichols Arcade, one of the doors says Mobiata, and there's still about 30 people up there working on this stuff. So yeah, really neat story happened here, and I mean, that stuff is in Ann Arbor, right? You just kind of have to seek it out. So telling a little bit about that story, Mobiata was successful because we managed to solve what I call like the $5 pain. Our apps were $4.99 and $9.99, like incredibly expensive when it comes to buying apps. Most people don't even want to spend $1. But because we help people travel more effectively, like traveling sucks, and people will easily spend $5 to make it just a little bit better, especially when a coffee in the airport is about $5 anyway. So our customer was that, and I think we found that's this great symbiosis of people who had a lot of problems and like using mobile to actually solve that. And I think I credit that for why Mobiata was ultimately really successful. So do think about that as you guys look at your startups and pains that you want to solve. Is this really something someone really, really gets anxious about and worries? And does my product help them solve that? So JetBlue's boardroom. I think this is a great story. Half of Mobiata's business that most people don't know is, in addition to doing consumer travel apps, we also built apps for some of the biggest travel companies, including JetBlue. And what was really unique about that is we were literally in JetBlue's boardroom, all of their executives. Mobiata at the time was no more than just a couple 23-year-olds. We were all 23, 24. And I remember being really intimidated coming into that because we were selling this $1 million plus app to JetBlue, just a couple 23 and 24-year-olds, like, man, what the hell is JetBlue going to do working with us? Like, why are they possibly doing this? And within the first 10 minutes, it became obvious that we were the smartest guys in the room. Like, when it came to mobile and travel, like, these guys were clueless. In fact, the exercise I remember most is they had put their website up on the wall, and the executives were pointing out the different pieces of the website and discussing which vendors ran each individual piece. None of their technology was being done in-house, which when you look back makes sense, right? They're in the business of flying people around, not building websites, but as a technologist, I was like, that is insane. And I see how like a company like ours can really help you guys do what you need to do. So, keep that in mind, right? You guys know a heck of a lot more than most people in industry, especially when you get into some of the older spaces where they haven't updated their technology in 20 years. So that's an asset. Consider that. And a lucky time. So, looking back on Mobiata, that was, I think to some extent, the lightning strike, right? The company was built up and sold in about 2.5 to 3 years, which is really atypical considering that 99% of startups fail. And I tell you that because I don't want you guys to get sucked into like the TechCrunch way of looking at things where like if everything's not $1 billion success, then it's not worth doing. Because the reality is startups are really, really hard and you crank for years to make things work. I'll tell you about that in my current company where it's been a rough road. So think about that, like consider that, right? It's not always gonna work the first time through. So worth considering. So sold to Expedia in 2010. I had spent a year there. My team built out all of Expedia's current mobile stuff. So if you book an Expedia product today, it came from all of us. I ultimately decided to leave after a year and gave my 3-month notice. And I tell that story because that was an incredibly tough decision to ultimately leave. You're leaving the team that you built, you're leaving a whole bunch of money on the table, and you're going into the vast unknown, which I remember having a huge hit on my personal identity because you had spent the last 3 years building this company, and now you leave into the unknown. And that was super challenging. The other reason I tell you that is you guys are in a really fortunate spot right now being students, where you basically have complete upside for taking risk. No one's really making much money yet. Why the hell not try everything you can possibly try? Because here's the reality of once you graduate. As I said, I've graduated about 5 years ago. All your friends go out, they get really nice jobs, buy fancy cars, fancy apartments, and leaving that to start a company is like unthinkable for most people. And like the word I use to describe it is actually like fear. So really, really, really think about that. And that's why I say, you know, if you're a sophomore right now and you're thinking about starting a company, like go fucking start a company, because the only thing that can happen is you'll either succeed or you'll fail and you'll learn more, and then people will give you more money to try again. And if you start now, you will definitely continue once you graduate. So do really, really think about that. Backpacking Asia. After I left Expedia, my girlfriend and I went to Asia to backpack. What's unique about that is we were a travel company. We made apps to help people travel the world. I had never been overseas. I'd never been overseas. We never had time. So finally went out there to scratch that itch. And I can tell you our apps do work in Asia. So I was happy to see that. So now I want to tell you about what I'm doing with my current company. The genesis of Filament Labs, which is my company today, started with an obsession around habits. I'm an engineer, but I had always been interested in human psychology, and to the point where I was reading everything I could find, working with professors on the subject, and I felt that it was possible to build a platform and app to influence human behavior, to fundamentally change people's habits. And that's ultimately the seed that got Filament Labs started. And it turns out that that assumption was wrong, and I'll tell you why. But that's kind of what got me going. 3 months in a failed partnership, this was a huge learning for me. So as the company was getting going, I had found a professor in the space that we worked in, and for 3 months, I tried to partner with him. Because if we were able to actually put that together, it would have been a really powerful combo for taking what we were doing and commercializing it. Spent 20 grand on lawyer fees, 3 months of time, multiple flights, like everything I could do to try and get this going, and it ultimately failed. And it was a huge distraction for the company and for myself in hindsight. And the reason that failed is because in the first 2 weeks, I didn't have the conversation about aligning what we were trying to do. I kind of saw the world in a slightly different way than he saw the world, which we didn't really realize initially, but after 3 months, it became obvious that, you know, there wasn't a way to work together. And I tell you that so that as you guys approach people to partner with, our team members, like in that first week, have that like super frank conversation about what you guys are out to achieve, because like that stuff will bite you in the ass later. So do have that. An emotional roller coaster. So coming off of a failed partnership, coming off of the fact that habit formation technology wasn't necessarily the right hypothesis, you know, the last 6 or 7 months of Filament Labs were incredibly bumpy for my partner and I. We are a healthcare IT company. We sell to enterprises, and if you don't have your product totally right or your assumptions totally right, it's a really, really nasty environment. Some pretty low days in that for sure. In fact, Filament Labs almost shut down like 5 times. We're turning the corner now, and I'll tell you about that, but like almost shut down 5 times. And I think the greatest documentary I saw that kind of captures this understanding or this feeling is there's a Netflix documentary called like Indie Gamers. Have you guys, any of you guys heard of that? Yeah, so go check that out. It's awesome. They went out and they followed like 3 or 4 teams of developers who were making independent games for the Xbox. Basically like 1 or 2 guys who will spend 3 years in their house building an independent game, and then they put it on Xbox Live for, you know, $49 or $9.99. But they're super candid about the ups and downs of that experience. Like, for example, you know, one of the guys is like, I just spent the morning laying on the floor of my shower until the water went cold. Like, that's how shitty I feel about the last 2 years in our game that we're building. He's like, this sucks. No one's gonna fucking want this. And then fast forward to the guy just putting it on the Xbox Live store, and turns to the camera and he's like, we just made more money in the last 3 hours than I have in the last 5 years. And it's like the incredible highs and the incredible lows. And startups are very much like that. And I think that documentary captured it really well. So do check that out. So Techstars, you guys familiar with Techstars? Yep, more or less. So I just finished a program in Techstars Austin. We were one of the 10 companies in their inaugural class. Really awesome experience. I think, you know, people talk about incubators being blown over. I don't think it's the end all. I think you have to have a reason for doing startups besides just to get into an incubator, but I do think it can be a really great step and can help up people's games. So do check that out. What's really unique about Techstars is we didn't write a single line of code for the entire 3 months. Not a single one, my partner and I. And that was different than how the other 9 companies run their business, and that's different than how most startups are thought to be run. But the reason being is, again, we are a healthcare company. The biggest risk is not whether or not we can build this software, but whether or not we understand our customers' pains and whether or not we can sell it, and whether or not the price is right, and whether or not our market is right. And that information is only de-risked through tons and tons of meetings. So we spent 3 months almost entirely out of the building talking to people. Lesson there being is, I understand like 40% of you guys are engineers. I'm an engineer. Like, I love to fucking build stuff, but oftentimes with startups, that's not the most important thing to be doing. So do think about that. So finding our $26 billion niche. So let me tell you what Filament Labs does. We are building a patient engagement platform. And what that means is we give health providers tools to track and manage their patients whenever patients are outside of the clinic. The patient side is an app. The doctor side is a dashboard that tracks and controls the whole experience. What is really unique about what we do is we have a hyper-focus on certain types of chronic disease and certain types of drugs, drugs that are very, very expensive. And that's why I say finding a $26 billion niche is, if you're going to rob a bank, you should rob the one that has the most money, right? And I think healthcare is the same way. We focus on places where drugs can be $10,000 a treatment, where, in the case of our industry, just 1,600 patients will actually cost health insurers something like $400 million a year to insure just those patients because their treatments are so expensive. Currently, most of these spaces are being managed with paper and pencil and fridge magnets and a folder of information. And we are bringing a platform to completely overhaul and replace that. And then ultimately turn that understanding that data into reduced cost. So, that was a revelation for us. As I said, we started in habit technology, which is probably as general as you could possibly think, now into an incredibly niche, incredibly focused business around super expensive drugs in the healthcare space. So, for what that's worth, the schlep bias. So Paul Graham has written about this. You can go read his essay, and I think it's really poignant. I look at a lot of young technologists, and like oftentimes people are working on, kind of stuff we've seen for the last 10 years, right? Another dating site, another photo sharing app, things like that. I think we've seen some success there, but I think you'll have far more success if you take what Michigan is teaching you well and go into the unsexiest, hardest industry you can find and innovate. And that's called the schlep bias. Basically, we are biased to things that are easy. And as an entrepreneur, if you force yourself to go out there and learn something that's really, really hard, I think you can find a lot of opportunity, such as, for example, healthcare. I am not a doctor, knew literally nothing about the space a year ago, and it was incredibly challenging to understand the lingo, who to talk to have relationships, et cetera. But 8 months in, we finally got there, and now we're at a really, really awesome place. In fact, we will be powering patient apps in 20 clinics by year end, in the middle of fundraising, which is going really well, have a distribution channel lined up. So like all the things that you want to look for in an enterprise startup, we've been able to put in place. So I'm super excited about that. No more. I think the last thing I was going to tell you about was anatomy of a seed round. Has anybody here done any fundraising or is thinking about it? A couple people? So this is my fourth startup, but my first one that we actually raised money for. And really interesting experience learning. I'll tell you a couple insights. It is absolutely a numbers game. Like, you will have meetings with 300 people, basically, to close an angel round. That's kind of how that works. Two, that is what a CEO does. And that was something for me to learn, right? So like I think it's possible to have an idea of a startup CEO as like a product guy, he's got his headphones on, he's coding, that kind of stuff. The reality is he spends most of his time outside the building meeting with people, particularly in a venture-backed company. So consider that. If you're looking at being the CEO, it's actually a really different set of responsibilities than you might think. And I encourage you to either send me an email to talk with me about that, or like go find people who have been CEOs and talk. The last thing I will say is be awesome at email. Be really awesome at email, because it will take you a really long way. And here's what I mean by that. Lots of people have blogged about this, but like when you need to meet with 300 people, you need to send thousands of emails to actually make those meetings happen. And oftentimes these people are really, really, really busy. So you have to get really good at crafting emails that are to the point, 2 sentences long. Here's exactly what I need. Here's times to make scheduling this really easy. So that all that person has to do is reply yes. In fact, to the point where, like if you need an introduction to someone, the way that you might think about that is you might email the person who knows that person and say, hey, can you intro me to this guy? You know, I'm doing this. Here's 3 paragraphs about what I'm doing. Like, I want to meet this guy. That email will sit in that box for weeks because that person's too busy. So the way this is actually done is what's called the forwardable intro, where you write an email that is perfectly designed so that all your person you're asking has to do is hit forward to the person that you need to meet. And that will happen in 30 minutes. They can do it from their iPhone. And that was a huge learning for me. And I think, you know, I was like, man, if there's one lesson I want to like share with these guys, it's like, be fucking awesome at email, because it will take you a long way, because most people kind of suck at it. Yeah. So anyway, those are my stories. David, want to chat a little bit?
That's great. It's your email, right?
That's right. This is me. I love talking with students, particularly around startups, so definitely email me. That's my Twitter handle. Like, I have a lot of time for that, so please, I would love to hear your idea. We should chat.
So typically, Jason, you know, I would spend some time asking you questions. I have a lot of questions I'd like to ask, but I want to make sure, you know, it's rare for us to have someone that's so recently graduated and been really in the seat of the students here. So I want to make sure that we give the students an opportunity to ask as many questions as they can. So what I'm going to do is just open it up right now to y'all. And if you have questions, let's just ask them away, and if there's some breaks, then I'll ask you a couple more.
For sure. Yeah.
What were your greatest successes and failures? What have they taught you?
Yeah. I think the greatest lessons come through failure. I think that you're more than likely to stuff up everything about your first startup. So you better start while you're young and while there's people that will teach you and show you what went wrong, so that you can do it again a better time the next time around. So yeah, it's the post-mortem on something is really, really valuable, because then you do it again the next time twice as fast and you don't make those mistakes. You know, really similar to like programming, right? As you start a first project, takes like hours to get the simplest thing done, and then you look back on that like 2 months later and you're like, man, I'm a master now. So like, do consider startups are kind of the same way. Yeah. And then on a corollary, successes are great, but like you can't let yourself get comfortable, right? I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs, like friends of mine, who will, like, they'll have their one success and then they'll kind of just like cruise. And they're like, hey, I'm going to phone it in for 3 years. I'm going to collect some money. I'll do this thing again later. And you, like, the reality is you don't. Like, you buy a house, like, you have a family, and that stuff really, like, that urge to create really slows down. So consider that.
Yeah. So you started really young, you know, with entrepreneurship, and, you know, you created companies, like you said, as a junior. Mm-hmm. So what gave you the confidence to be able to take that leap and, you know, to start as a junior in college and, you know, creating these companies? What was the, you know, the on switch that allowed you to make that, you know, big leap?
I think, so one, the university has a lot of support, and I think they have even more so now, right? So like with even the smallest of ideas and the smallest of teams, like I think there's a lot of people here that will help you, that will give you money, and that will convince you to stay for the summer to give things a shot. So that was definitely a spur. You know, the other thing I'll say is, I think that it's important for people to spend a little bit of time in a big company to understand what that's like, which gives you skills to like go out and actually start startups, but to like relate the whole thing together. You know, looking back as a freshman, actually, after that year, I was one of, I think, 3 freshmen to actually go out and get an internship. I used to work for Procter & Gamble and worked on baby wipes, of all things. I wrote equations to model how baby wipes were made at Procter & Gamble. But by doing that as a freshman, like I knew what that path looked like. And then, so come sophomore year where someone's like, hey, here's 25 grand, like, why don't you guys stay this summer and give this a shot? You're like, absolutely. Why the hell wouldn't I do that? So, if there's any lesson there, go spend some time at a bigger company or a bigger startup. Like, see what they have to teach you, and then feel confident that you can go out there and reproduce that yourself the next time around.
Question is how to choose who you partner with as you're starting your team.
That's an awesome question, and the answer is they're sitting around you. Like, the people that you are with for the next 4 years will be the people you are most likely to start companies with, hands down. As I look to who my team is made up of, now and who I will start companies with in the future, like, a lot of those people will be sourced from, like, the friends that I made while working on EECS projects late at night, while, working on projects, things like that. It's the people that you're surrounded with here. And I actually made a mistake at this. I was an engineer, but I remember, like, pointedly not making friends with as many of the engineers as I should have. Like, I spent a lot more time down on Central Campus, and that was, like, a huge mistake. So looking back on it now, like, I should have made a point to, like, know every single person in my class. Because, like, as I said, those are the people that you'll start companies with, for sure. Are your coworkers, right? So your first job, those people will that's who you're going to be like, hey, man, let's leave this thing. I got an idea. Let's go start it. So, yeah. Yeah, I learned it at Techstars. That's how Techstars does they have what are called founders talks. So once a week, just like this, they'll bring in a founder to kind of explain their story, and this is the format that they use. No decks. Basic idea is, like, someone's story I don't necessarily think can be distilled down into 20 PowerPoint slides with lessons on each single slide. I think it's better to expose viscerally, like, here's the highs, here's the lows, and then let the audience kind of take away their own conclusions from that. So that's the reason for my format. My first time I've ever done it like that, I thought it went pretty cool, so I think I'll do it again. Yeah.
You talked about earlier, one of the hardest parts about seeing all of your friends going to different cities and, having established salaries, and then you're here doing your own thing, nothing's confirmed, and a lot of risk around it. And you said one of the big things was fear. Can you talk about that more and kind of, like, I guess the social impact and personal impact that it has on you?
Yeah, it's a really interesting subject for me, and my girlfriend can probably tell you a lot about that. But I remember in college never having any fear about startups. Like, for example, Campus Roost, we spent all summer building this thing. We put 700 chairs around the campus. Like, every single person we knew was about to see everything that we had worked on. And my older self now would be like, man, Jason, like, weren't you afraid? They would be like, dude, this is so stupid. Like, why the hell were you spending the summer on this? Like, I was out making 10 grand. But as a student, like, we never even thought that way. We had no fear. And I suspect that you guys probably see the world pretty similarly. Like, if you want to stay up all night hacking on something, like, do it. Like, let's just see what happens. And what really, really changes is as you do get out in the real world and you're surrounded by people who don't really think that way, that fear will come in, and that makes startups a lot harder. And I've kind of felt that pretty viscerally with, Filament Labs, especially in the beginning days when things weren't looking so well. Like, there were days where I was like, I really hope that no one asks me what I'm working on today, because I really fucking don't want to tell them. I might even make something up. Like, I don't feel confident about this right now. And yeah, so fear is a really real thing. And I think to mitigate that, getting as much experience as a student will really help you as you go forward.
Yeah. How did you balance EECS and starting businesses? How did you think? I just find it pretty difficult, so I'm wondering how you do it.
Yeah. I mean, EECS is a lot of work, right? A ton of work. I was able to balance it because, like, a ton of the EECS curriculum, especially if you're a computer science guy, like, it's all, you can work on your company, right? So all the master's design stuff, like, that can all be company-related things. And it was for us. I also, priority, right? So, like, definitely do your stuff with EECS. Definitely, like, I think getting good grades is pretty damn important because, like, you want to think at that level. But you can find time to work on your startup, for sure. Sundays, man, yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about Do Good. What's interesting to me about that one is it wasn't actually a product for sale, so there's no revenue coming in,
right.
Yet the company gets sold. So talk to us a little bit about that process.
Yeah, so, the more in tuna you would pick up, Do Good is not a business. It was like more of an experiment in virality or like a project. And you know, the way we rationalized that as a company was do good would be the thing we would do just to get exposure, and then we would go figure out how we would make money. We had also looked at consulting stuff, so like maybe do good was the way that we proved to people we could make this stuff, and then people would go pay us. And do good became a thing of its own. Like basically, it got a whole bunch of social attention, really similar to how people talk about like Snapchat or things like that. Now, obviously, at a much, much smaller scale. But that's ultimately how Do Good got sold. Is there are a lot of people in the world that care a lot about user engagement around certain topics. And believe it or not, even in the good deed space, there are companies that care about these audiences. And that's ultimately the value prop that Do Good brought and why we were able to sell the company. But you know, we didn't know any of that going into it. So I don't know if there's a lesson there. I don't think I can sit and advocate that you start a company that doesn't really have a business model. But I think as students, you know, man, just do it. Like, get you and your buddy and like make something cool and put it out there, because you're gonna learn a ton. And who knows, like maybe a bunch of other people think it's cool.
So the whole process of doing an exit, you know, especially when you're a student, this happened twice to you, right?
Yep.
So how does that happen? I mean, it sounds like from what I'm hearing from you is that they came to you and it all happened pretty quickly, but the whole notion of selling a company is a complex one. Can you reduce it down for us and what it's like?
Yeah, Do Good was interesting. So I'll talk about Do Good and I can chat a little bit about Mobiata. So Do Good, we are running the thing, wake up every morning, we put the good deeds in, we make sure the community is happy, we answer some emails. We're juniors at the time. All of a sudden we get an email from, like, I think the CEO of Tonic, this company, and he's like, hey, I really like what you guys are doing. Like, I'm interested in talking about acquiring the assets. Like, we should chat. Got on a Skype call with him, had a series of basically 2 or 3 Skype calls where things were feeling good. And then they sent over their offer. And, you know, ultimately in the realm of startup exits, like really, really small, but for juniors, we're like, this is awesome, this is huge. But I was smart enough to call up a mentor of mine, Mark Weiser, who's a venture capitalist in town. I'm like, Mark, what do I do about this offer? And he's like, just ask them that you need twice. And I was like, well, how do I justify that? He's like, just make it up. Just like tell them that you need twice. So we did that. We returned the email being like, you know, this does not work for us. We're going to need double this number. Here's our spreadsheet of bullshit on like why this is justified. Literally, it's I should like find it and be able to display it because it's ridiculous. And the reason we were able to do that is because, like, I guess we were willing to walk away. Like, we were willing to continue doing Do Good as well. So that allowed us to kind of hold that card. And what happened is they met us in the middle. So we made basically like 30% more in the acquisition just because, you know, we had gotten some advice to take kind of a stronger hand in negotiation. And you have that leverage, right? Like, they don't want that asset to go away. And that's why they're talking to you. So I thought that was pretty unique as juniors. Yeah.
I asked Mark Weiser before you came here, I said, what is it that makes Jason distinctive? And he thought for about 2 seconds. He said, he just goes out and does it, right? And, but part of what you went out and did was get a relationship with Mark, right? Mm-hmm. So somehow it seems like you've gathered around you a passel of mentors and advisors and now investors. Mm-hmm. How do you do that?
Yeah. So here's another insight for you guys that I wish someone would have told me when I was a student is study and exploit the concept of social capital. I think there's been books and stuff written on this, but the basic idea is, you know, life is a network and our individual role is to push as much value into that network as we can and just have the faith that it's going to ultimately come back to you. And I think, you know, that's one thing I've always tried to do well is like help as many people as I possibly can. You know, even mentors actually like mentor relationships. People love to teach. They love to like help someone learn in the path that they also went in. So like that is an example of like a symbiotic relationship, and it all fundamentally relates to social capital. So consider that.
So right. Your email's up here.
Yeah.
You've been mentored, but there's a bunch of students out here that might actually be viewing you the way you viewed Mark a few years ago. Mm-hmm. Are you open to students talking to you? And
I am. Yeah. No, email me. But do it right. Go read about how to send a good email, and then email me. Yeah. Yeah.
So real quickly, we just have a couple more minutes.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about Filament Labs in more detail. So you had some real rough moments, and this is going to close 5 different times, but you've just turned a corner. I mean, and you were just telling me right before this class that you received another bit of investment. What is it that's turning the corner for you? Is it just sheer doggedness, or is it a bit of luck, or some combination? What's going on there that's making this happen now?
The big reason is we found a paying customer. And a paying customer is just a single, like the top of the iceberg for an entire industry of people that will pay. And that is what's allowing us to turn the corner. What the most fulfilling part of Filament Labs is we are a team of technologists. We know mobile really well, we know software really well, but we do not know healthcare. And our customer is this perfect relationship where they're actually giving us full access to their clinics, to their nursing staff, to their patients, and we work hand in hand with nurses who have done this for 25 years to iron out where all the pains are and how technology can fit. And from this, it's customer-driven development, right? From actual pains that you observe that people pay for, it's really easy to understand what the company should do. So I would advise you, as you guys look at startups in, say, an enterprise space, it all starts with the customer. Figure out who, don't focus on making 5 million people happy, make 3 people or 20 people really, really, really happy, and then you can grow from there for what that's worth. Yeah.
Jason, we're really fortunate to have you here.
Yeah.
Let's thank Jason for coming. He'll be here for a few minutes afterwards. Feel free to come on down and talk with him.
Thanks, y'all.